So, hi everybody, and some of you I have been seeing since day one, so it's so good. Like Cindy, so welcome to this beautiful transmission, as I call it, and it's a beautiful gathering. We've been having great energies in this sacred container since yesterday. So grateful to all the speakers who have been joining us and who are to come yet. So we still have some speakers that are going to join us today. So it's going to be a great day. So this is a transformative event dedicated to reimagining education beyond the limitations of the traditional system. Educage is more than a conference, it's a movement rooted in the belief that learning should be liberating, individualistic, inspiring, inclusive, and lifelong. And I do love this Buddhist quote, which says, know well what keeps you going and what holds you back, and choose the path that leads to wisdom. So beautiful, beautiful words. So this global gathering is devoted to liberating learning from outdated systems and reconnecting education with intuition, creativity, and soul purpose. So let's explore what's possible together with Educage, unlearn and break free to create the universities of the new earth. My name is Amarpal Sohi, or Ami for short, and I am the host and the creatrix of this event. I'm very grateful and honored to have you all here today. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here. And thank you for making this a special event. So yeah, very grateful. Thank you. So without further ado, I'm beyond excited and honored to present to you Miss Frances Billinghurst. Welcome, Frances. How are you doing?
I'm wonderful, Emmy. Thank you very much for that warm welcome and inviting me to your wonderful event. I'm excited.
Oh, most welcome. The honor and pleasure is all mine. So again, welcome. And for those of you who don't know Frances, I'm going to do a short introduction. So Frances Billinghurst is an author, initiated witch and priestess, death walker, end-of-life doula, and metaphysician who has been interested in ancient cultures, mythologies, and esoteric sciences for over half of her lifetime. Wow. As a prolific writer, Frances is the author of Dancing the Sacred Wheel, one of the few books solely dedicated to the Sabbath in the Southern Hemisphere, Encountering the Dark Goddess, a journey into the shadow realms, and On Her Silver Rays, a guide to the moon, myth and magic, among other titles. Her essays have appeared in numerous anthologies such as A Mantle of Stars, a devotional to the Queen of Heaven, Naming the Goddess, The Fairy Queens, a collective of essays exploring the myth, magic, and mythology of the Fairy Queens, and Divine Wounds, finding healing by working with the goddess and archetypes. Frances is also the founder of the Mystical Soul Academy, which you can find details on her website, mysticalsoulacademy.com. And she offers online courses through udemy.com, and hosts online conferences. She also has her own YouTube channel and can also be found on social media, such as Facebook and Instagram. So, wow, what a beautiful background and biography. So again, welcome, Frances. And you're going to talk about what does the shadow has to do with the new earth consciousness. Beautiful topic, and let's dive into it. So Frances,
Yes.
how can working with the shadow create liberation for us, not only at the individual level, but also for the collective?
Yes, thank you, Emmy. Well, before I start, what's custom here in Australia is that I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land upon which I reside, and they are the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains here in South Australia. And by acknowledging them, I also acknowledge their elders, past, present, and emerging. So the shadow, it's a very popular term these days. It can be very loaded as well. And maybe even a bit of an unusual topic for this sort of conference. However, and I'm quite sure that everybody who's watching this will agree that in order for us to move forward to create a new world, a new earth, we really need to address the past. And that is what the shadow is all about. Because if we don't do this and we see what's happening around us currently, we just seem to keep going in this endless loop of repeating. And this endless cycle just occurs despite any really dissolvement of the old ways. And as I said, this is what's happening now. So yes, we're seeing a lot of sort of breakdown of the old constrictive ways, but in order for us to move forward, I think we also need to pause for a moment, just to reflect and to see. And this is also in the astrology and everything else that's happening around us, especially in the last couple of years. There's almost a need for us to process what is breaking down, to allow deeper hidden feelings, emotions that maybe we have not been allowed to experience or embody, such as anger, grief, sadness, and allow those sort of feelings, emotions, those sort of deep shadow aspects of our own self to be acknowledged before we can then also do a bit of decluttering and then move forward into something that's bright and new and shiny. So to me, the whole aspect of the shadow is more than just acknowledging sort of fears and failings, or where we haven't sort of met the mark, our phobias, but then also really diving deep and pulling up those emotions, those really, it could be scary, it could be make us feel uncomfortable. A lot of the shadow stuff is because when we allow ourselves that freedom, we then are able to move forward completely and really see the new, what we're wanting to create in a whole different mindset. And I'm saying this because, again, we're seeing the same patterns carrying on again and again. We're seeing the same woundings, we're seeing the same repressions, and it might be on different people or different groups of people. And I'm saying that from someone from a Caucasian, Western European background, and living on a country where, for, or say us white people, it's very difficult for us to stop and acknowledge, even though it has maybe not be our direct family, but the cultures of inhibition and suppression of the Indigenous peoples here in Australia. And I think that's one of the biggest wounds, especially from European perspective, that we need to stop sort of passing the buck, saying, oh, it's not my family, it's got nothing to do with me, but hold space for the people who have gone through that suppression or carrying that wounds. Again, from a Western point of view, we almost sort of operate on a higher level of stress, of suppression, because we've been suppressed for so long that that's our normal. But in other parts of the world, especially from the 17th century, this is new. And what we see as normal is not normal for anybody else. And again, so that's on a collective level, but it can be overwhelming. So what we need to do is just come back to ourselves first and then look at how we interact with our own sort of emotions, our own feelings, our own suppressions, what sort of triggers us and how we react, and then hold space for ourselves. And from there on, we can't heal the world, but we can heal ourselves and we can help healing other people around us. I like the analogy of being the pebble being thrown into the pond. we look after ourselves, we sort of look after our healing, we sort of dive deep into our own wounds, our own suffering, our own sort of emotional pain and suppression, our own shadow, and we get all that sort of messy stuff out there, then when we come out the other end like a phoenix rising up from the flame, it's through our actions, it's through that integration that instead of telling other people this is how you heal, we can show and lead by example. And through that, we can then change basically our whole direction that the world is heading in. According to me, this is all my opinion based on sort of my own ongoing exploration into the shadow.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, totally agree with you, Francis, because we need to first look at our wounds, at our shadows, and heal those. And then, we can't heal others, as you mentioned, if we're not healed ourselves, right? Because that energy will kind of reflect and mirror on the other person. Yeah.
And I think this is what we see even from the well-meaning people, is that they are projecting something onto other people, their own, it could be even their own expectations of their own sort of healed person. But then it's almost like spiritual bypass, and then they're ignoring all of their own wounds. And we have this perception, and I don't know if you can blame patriarchy or modern society or anything like that, it's so embedded in our culture that we have this sort of idealism that a healer has to be perfect, has to be saintly. And from my experience, I'm far from saintly. I don't like heights. I don't want to be put on a pedestal. I've found myself many a time rocking in a corner, crying my eyes out. But that's what you need to do to go through the pain, the guilt, the suppressed emotions. And then I don't know if I'm quite sure people have been noticing what's happening in the world today, and with our news media being like 24 hours a day, we're all hooking into those energetics, and it's draining and it's horrendous, and it doesn't matter what side of the fence you're on, everybody's getting very polarized, very divided, and we're getting caught up in the middle, and we're feeling all that energy because we're energetic beings as well. And that's adding to why people are finding it harder and harder to sort of cope. They don't have the energy. And again, where they're looking for basically, I wouldn't say escapisms, but they're looking for places where they can just pause and take a breath. Because again, our society doesn't allow us to do that. You're lazy, you're not productive, but it's just like we're not meant to be 24 hours a day going, especially with all these intense energies. We need to give ourselves that space to breathe, to integrate, to just pause. And to me, that's what the shadow aspect, that's what the underworld of my mythologies, my dark goddesses, they sort of take you into that sort of safe container away from everything. And that could even be like in a metaphorical cave, or we become that seed again in the dark, in the deepest of Mother Earth, ready to germinate again when we are ready. Not when society tells us or where we feel obligated to, but when we are ready. And we don't give ourselves today that time to just allow ourselves to sort of permeate and be until we are ready. So we need to slow down. We need to breathe. We just need to, I wouldn't say to cut ourselves off from the world. I'm personally not into that. You need to be aware of what's happening around, but try and limit yourself to how much news you take on, how much time you spend on social media. Find ways where you can ground, even if it is just walking barefoot on the earth in the gardens. If you don't have a local garden or don't have a garden of your own, maybe you have a local park that you can go to, sit on your balcony and allow the breeze come in. Just get back to nature. and ground yourself so you can be. And I think that's the most important thing at the moment that I can offer people.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, you're so right. We're bombarded, right? 24/7 by the media now. It's, everyone has their smartphones, so it's so easy to get information and negative information.
Yes.
There's a lot of positive, but we're just so bombarded with the negative. And that's when, yeah, I love that. We need to just put our phones away, go into nature, and just breathe,
Well,
Yeah.
even if we can't put our phones away, because, a lot of us are sort of like, we have to be on call because it's a mindset, but it's just like, allow yourself the gift to just take a couple of deep breaths before you answer that phone call, before you send that email. Just take a couple of, breathe into your diaphragm and set it up in your upper chest, and help yourself sort of ground and calm. And then you get into a better mindset. And in doing so, you can also ascertain what is important, what isn't important. And again, if we're focusing on creating something new, we have to start being a little bit more discerning into what we allow ourselves to take on, and put up boundaries and say no and keep those boundaries. And again, I know for myself how I was brought up being a female. We're told that we need to be there for everybody else. And it's just like, no. And again, this is something that I've long wrestled with. So this is my own sort of shadow wounds, or cultural upbringings, that you sort of suppress like your own sort of authenticity and your own sovereignty over the needs of other people. And that's something else that we need to sort of like question. Why do I need to do this? Why is this person making me angry or upset? And it's often because we've self-sacrificed ourselves to a point where an aspect of us is saying, it's my turn now. So enforce those boundaries so you can move forward.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I totally, because you have to have your cup full first, right? Fill up your cup before you can fill
Yes.
anybody else's. And also, if you haven't healed, you still have these emotions you haven't processed, then how can you be a good guardian, parent, teacher, to the children who look up to you as a role model, right?
Well, especially with say with social media, where there's so many conflicting opinions, it's like leading by example. And it's just like when you've sort of like processed your own, under a lot of the emotions that sort of rise up is sadness, utter sadness. Even under fear or anger, it's sadness. From a Western point of view, when we've had centuries upon centuries upon centuries of wars and conflicts, we've never been able to process that sadness. And these days, too, being made aware of the impact that colonialization in particular has had on other cultures, it's like taking that responsibility that maybe that was one of my ancestors, and then how does that make me feel that maybe one of my ancestors treated somebody else or some other people's family heritage appallingly. And that's sort of, it's like not making excuses, but working through those emotions with the knowledge that we have today. And all of this, again, is shadow work. This is like really digging deep. And what we realize is underneath all that, there is a lot of realization, there is freedom, there is, I like to say there's a gift in the darkness. I said, this is the seed that we can then plant. And it's not like throwing the baby out with the bathwater or anything like that. But it's just like, okay, learning from our mistakes. And whether it's a cultural mistake or an individual mistake or even a societal mistake, and saying, well, from this point forward, I'm not going to have that behavior. I'm not going to treat people like that. I'm going to take ownership from for my actions from this point forward. And then you lead by example for the younger generations coming through, giving them a clearer platform of, so looking at our society today in the West, how to treat people, just basic compassion. Because that's like, I wake up some days going, where is our human compassion, our humanity? Why are we seeing people as things? We aren't things. There is a heartbeat, and that's why we're seeing Mother Earth as a thing. She supports us. She's got a heartbeat. Why do we see animals and trees as things? They're not. We're all interconnected. And it's just getting back in touch with, so this is our humanity, but also the realization that we are all part of this living, breathing organism that is Mother Earth. And then we can go out further into the cosmos. So we're not individual and isolated. We are very much all connected. And for some people, that could be a really big realization. So this is why they need to just sit and be and allow those emotions and feelings to rise up and see how it feels.
Yeah, Sundi says that the washroom and the shower can become places of quietness. I have had mystical experiences there. Wow, that's beautiful, Cindy. Thank you for sharing. Actually, I've had downloads of poems in the shower. That's, yeah, because you feel so connected. I feel connected to the water, right? Yeah.
Yes, I find there's like, I have a routine in my life. It's a little bit like the Japanese tea ceremony, where you're making every or a lot of your mundane aspects sacred. When I have a shower in the morning, I'm visualizing it sort of cleansing not only, you know, my skin and my hair and all that, but purifying my soul. And there's lots of cultures all around the world where water is the purifier, where you wash your hands and your feet before you enter the sacred space. So in the morning, I wash myself, and I can sort of connect in firstly to my essence, my soul, and sort of get myself in that mental framework to say, yes, this is how I'm going to go out into the world. And you're opening yourself up to that channel, to the divine, or however you want to perceive that. And you can get some, yes, very profound thoughts, transmissions coming through. And for some people, that could be the only place where you can just be. It's wonderful.
Yeah, beautiful. So, Francis, when we've worked with our shadows, so what gifts are there to receive from the shadows?
Well, I seem to think, well, I'm of the belief that shadow work isn't a one-stop shop, and this is what unfortunately we see sort of it being packaged up on social media these days, and you have your tick boxes, I've done my shadow, onto the next thing, and it's just like, no, it's not like that. I like to quote, I think he's an American poet and also a Jungian psychologist, Robert Bly, and he said, you spend basically the first 20 years of your life, you have this bag, putting stuff into this bag. This is your shadow bag. And then you spend the rest of your life pulling stuff out. So I see the shadow, or I suppose it's us as an energetic being, like an onion. It's layer upon layer upon layer. And the ultimate gift, from my own personal experience, is the realization that, I suppose, things are just this sense of permeance, that nothing is, static, that everything changes, and that is okay. And that's probably one of the hardest gifts for us humans to accept, because we like things in neat little boxes so we can put labels on it. But through, I suppose, through my own spiritual practices, where I'm sort of like connecting in with the seasons and the phases of the moon, you learn to sort of ebb and flow, wax and wane. You have times where you're all energetic and you want to be out in the world. You have times where you want to be inside and be all quiet. And it's those quieter times is usually when I can sit and, I guess, open myself up to the shadows. So the ultimate gift, apart from knowing ourselves, is working through those layers of suppressed, it could be anger, frustration, things that even from childhood we may have been told, even an off the cuff comment, oh, you know, so you take a picture home to your parents and they said, oh, well, that doesn't look like a tree. That's a useless tree. Oh, you know, that was a horrible poem. Just a little off the cuff comment that could actually scar you really for the rest of your life. I know my younger brother, back in the, I think when he was 15 or 16 and he was learning to drive, there was some discussion had between him and my father, and my father made an off-the-cuff comment saying, oh, don't do that. You know, give me the wheel, you can't drive, that sort of thing. And he's carried that with him. So now he's in his 40s and he still doesn't drive because of that one comment that, and Dad probably doesn't even realize that he made it at the time. And I know when I was learning to drive, I had lots of comments like that saying, you can't drive, give me the wheel, get out of the driver's seat. But my brother just took that to heart. And it's interesting when we get those opportunities, when we can sit as to what comes up, especially from, some people call it, you know, your inner child, what sort of scarring or message that they heard that you're still hanging on to on a subconscious level. And then the next thing is like, does it, or is it relevant today? Because you're no longer that child. I know in my own experience, I used to write poetry when I was in the late teens. This was back in the 80s. It was sort of the anti-nuclear era in New Zealand, where I'm originally from. And my father, again, don't mean to blame my father, but he thought it was all morbid. I'll say morbid crap, sorry. That's what he said. And it took me a while before I had the confidence to write poetry again. And I do like the morbid stuff, because to me, death is not the end. I don't see it as morbid. I find a fascination as to why we sort of see our lives as linear, where I, again, through my interest in esoteric philosophies and other traditions, see it very much as cyclic. So I don't see death as an end. I don't see death as a natural process as being morbid. I have a different take on sort of dark goddesses and the underworld journey, and probably even the shadow work. I don't see this as sort of threatening or horrible. Yes, it can be uncomfortable, but I also see it as it's part of us. We are reclaiming an aspect of ourselves that maybe we didn't even realize that we have pushed away, because if we stood out from the crowd, especially when we're in our childhood or early teens, we don't want to stand out. We want to fit in. So we dim our light down. And where does that light go? It doesn't get extinguished because that's part of us. It gets pushed into the shadows. So when we're trying to sort of discover ourselves or our purpose later on in life, we find that we can write fantastic poetry. Well, some people might be a little bit more supportive. And yes, we can drive. And it doesn't mean that, you know, it's too late to drive. We can drive in our 40s or 50s. We can take that, you know, that next step of freedom. We can sort of find our voice again and actually go, no, I'm not going to be silenced anymore. I have something to say and I would like to say it. So we find all these gifts. And that's another thing about the shadow. A lot of people see it as negative, that it's, you know, anger or experienced emotions, unprocessed emotions, things like that. But then it's also often our talents as well. And Carl Jung talked about the golden shadow. And this is something that sort of is buried beneath all that sort of murkiness, that uncomfortableness, that we sort of suppress everything. There's also that freedom of finding ourselves, that we don't need to fit into this little box anymore, that we can be our unique individual self in a world that very quickly you think everybody's wanting to be cloning, but it's just like, I like being different. I like standing out from the crowd. and following my own drum. But then that's just me.
Yeah, beautiful. So yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it down. The shadows are also kind of a gift, right? Because through the shadows, we find our superpowers, you know, once we process them, heal them. It's in that the darkness that the brightest light actually shines,
Yes.
once we're healed. Yeah. So it's I think shadows are there, to for our soul's growth actually, and kind of an initiation for us to
It
get
it
to the next level.
it is. It's like sort of like that. So we live in a culture, especially in the West, where there's been this big fear of the darkness, the unknown. But when you
Mm.
look at Mother Earth, when we plant our seeds, they have to go in the dark for them to
Mm.
germinate. So we are that seed. We need to go into the dark to germinate, to process, to break through. We don't see the beauty in the night sky unless it's dark. So there is a lot of benefits. And yes, it can be a little bit unsure, but just think of all the potential that is there. So that pregnant pause, it's almost like that sort of being in the womb of gestation, in the big cosmos. It's like, what can we bring out? What can we bring forth from within our own selves? And it's like when we go into our own selves, if we're not sort of happy or we don't know who we are, then it is again, there's all that potential. It's like, what do we want to bring forward? And in order to bring forward, we have to make space. And this is where we sort of take that time out to say, well, what do we want to leave behind? What doesn't resonate with us? What's no longer part of us? We might be carrying on somebody else's perceptions and ideas, or even someone else's wounds and triggers that aren't even ours. And that's a big thing in a lot of psychological circles these days, where they're talking about intergenerational wounds. We're doing things, we're carrying it down our DNA, our family lines, even our cultural lines. But we all have the right to say, you know what, no, that's not the direction I want to head into. I want to start a new cycle. I want to have a new future and create something completely different. And then you can find other people who think the same lines. And it's just like, no, you can't change the world by yourself, but you can influence the people around you one by one. And again, like that pebble being thrown into the pond, it's the ripples that flow out from it. And to me, that is going within to find your shadow, integrating your shadow, finding out who you really are and what's really important to you, and then merging that through, integrating that, looking towards the future and going, okay, what do I want to bring forward? And then going forward from that deep strength from inner, your own being.
Beautiful. So, what practices do you do, to work with your shadows?
I do a lot of reflection. And this is something that I have built up over the years. It's like when I see myself or catch myself being triggered or emotionally wanting to react, I will take a couple of deep breaths and then sort of take a step back and go, okay, if it's something that where I don't have to respond to straight away, sort of take that in the dialogue as to why am I being emotional? What emotions are coming up and what is underneath all those emotions? Again, it's finding that sort of luxury, I guess, in some cases, of that place of stillness. If I'm not able to do that, well, then it is the deep breathing. There's a practice that I do. It's called the fourfold breath, where you sort of inhale for a count of 4, hold for a count of 4, exhale for a count of 4, hold for a count of 4. So yogic sort of teachings. And again, it helps you sort of ground and refocus. Our modern society, we're too much in our heads, and it sort of brings us back into our heart. I'm also a sort of devotee when it comes to using mantras. I like mantras. I'll sit there. I've got a few sort of Hindu deities that I love saying their mantras to. One of them is Ganesha, because he's the Lord of the remover of obstacles. And sometimes that obstacle is me or my mindset. And what I like about the mantras is that you're hooking, and you don't have to be Hindu or anything or Buddhist. You're actually hooking into the energetics of everybody else on the planet, whoever still is chanting those mantras. And even if you're just saying Om, it just, again, it helps you move out of your head back into your heart. And I find that really calms you, or calms me, sort of brings my emotions back under control, where I can think a little bit more clearly. Other practices I do is go for a walk, getting back to nature. Whether I've got a luxury here, I have a garden, I go digging in the garden, go down to the beach, go for a hike, go down to the gym and work out, especially if it's frustration or rage. And I know some people will say maybe that's transference, but I think, and especially for women and other suppressed people, we have swallowed our rage and our anger for so long. We need to sort of have it brought up. We need to release it. So physical activity, even dancing, really wild abandonment, vocalizing, just seeing what sound sort of comes up and speaking out, even if the only place you can do that is in the shower or in the bathroom. Yeah, that can help. And again, for women, it's that speaking, because we have been taught to, we're not supposed to speak. We're supposed to, not be angry. We're supposed to be calm and calm everybody down. So we have a lot of throat issues. And then we wonder why we swallow our anger, and then we take it all internally, and then we have a lot of lower digestional problems, because we swallow and digest our own anger. So we need to release it in one way or another. And I personally find that any sort of somatic body work is really beneficial for me. It might not work for everybody else, but it's like finding out what you can do and what suits you in your own practice.
Yeah, Cindy's also made an interesting comment, epigenetically. So she's saying, I was carrying trauma from colonization, which you talked about. Love was the trigger for me to take the step against the flow of that trauma. And traveling to that country that colonized my ancestors' country, and getting to better understand things dissipated the trauma.
Yes, and from so from a Caucasian, European, probably a colonialistic background myself, I think for us white people, our responsibility, or what we can do, is to hold space for people who have been colonialized, whose families and whose peoples have gone through that. Even if even if it's not our direct family, it is still our culture. And the least we can do is listen to them. And yes, it can be confronting. And it can be painful, knowing that this is the implication or the flow-on effect that our actions or our cultural actions have done, whether they were aware of it or not at the time. But again, it's holding space for people who have not had the opportunity to be heard. And that can help in the healing. And then both parties can go, okay, how do we now move forward? So it's listening to everybody and then moving forward.
Yeah, beautiful. So, Francis, how can we bring your teaching, maybe bring more of that shadow work into the classroom?
I think a lot of it comes down to, again, being honest, having those conversations. I mean, I'm talking a little bit from, say, a little bit of what I've experienced, what I'm seeing here in Australia. the colonialistic impact has been horrific, even down to when Captain James Cook, who was the Englishman who founded Australia, he wrote back to England that this land was terra nullius, which basically means empty. And when they were putting forth their constitution, that was actually still put on their constitution. That was terra nullius. There was no one here, belonged to no one, which was not true. We have one of the oldest continuous living groups of people, the Aborigines, who've been here for like 65,000+ years. What, from the Western point of view, we don't understand that impact of those words. And that's what saddens me, is that there's still this mentality that the history of the Aboriginal peoples have not been taught in schools. And also the impact of colonialisation has not been taught in schools. I know when I was growing up, there was another country, we learned about America and Industrial Revolution in England, but we didn't learn, because I was from New Zealand, we didn't learn about the Maori Wars. We didn't learn as to what happened when the English came to New Zealand. That came later, if we wanted to look at it. And I think in the classroom today, there needs to be a truth telling. There needs to be also the realization that, yes, some of this is a little bit brutal history, but it needs to come out. And it's in a lot of the countries around the world, like in Canada and America, even in India, and I think everywhere else that, and it's not just it is largely the English, but there's also the Spanish, there's also the French as well, the Dutch. And it's just like, need to take ownership and have it out there. So this is like the collective shadow that has been hidden. And then from there on, it's like, again, looking back and saying, what's the implication? And how can we move forward? And what I mentioned earlier, and this is something that I think she was a Native American psychologist, Lyle June Jones, I can't remember her correct name, but because she said this a number of years ago, that sort of resonated with me, is that, again, Westernization, or us Westerners, our trauma level is at such a peak because we've had centuries upon centuries upon centuries, thousands of years of it being unprocessed. So we see that as our normal. When colonialization happens on peoples who have never gone through all those centuries upon centuries of wars, or to the extent that Europe has gone through, this is why Indigenous peoples' wounds or their inability to sort of process all this is so high, so heightened. It's because we see that, we as in the white people see it as our normal, and it's not normal. But we have just programmed ourselves to operate on that higher stress level. And what we're seeing is that from the Indigenous peoples, there's almost this mirror saying, this realization that what we think is normal is no longer normal. So it's a big sort of learning curve for us. Yet it's almost like we have not had or we don't have the skills to properly delve into that, or even the ownership. A lot of it's ownership of admitting that we got it wrong. And that can be a very humbling thing to admit too. Because we think then if we admit that we were wrong, that the other person will do to us as we've done to them. And it's just like, no. If we all sort of have saying, well, how can we then move forward? And we can't correct the past, or we can't change the past. But what can we do to now move forward and create a new world, a new vision for the future? What can we learn? And be respectful in that area as well.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I think the truth has to be told, right, in the classroom. Yeah. But
Mhm.
now I think the hidden is coming to light. It's just the energies of the earth now. We can't hide anything,
Mm.
any longer. Yeah.
Yes,
Mm.
yes. And it is, I think too, because again, as I said, we don't seem to have a lot of the skills to properly process. We have to allow ourselves that's a space to process, regardless of what side of the divide we're on. Colonizers, the people who have been colonized, we need space to process our emotions, to work through them, and that could be a complete shift in itself, allowing, as it's more than just one sort of item. It's like a whole way of how we move in the world needs to change to allow people that space, that opportunity to process and then gain those sort of skills, those coping mechanisms in order to move forward. And it's not going to be something that will happen overnight. But if we start working on even just one aspect of our own selves, we can then help build up the skill set for the next generation and then the next generation after that. And again, we're changing everything. We're breaking down the old way of doing things, of pushing everything under the carpet, of patriarchal mindset, if you want to call it that, of Western capitalism, of the colonialistic mindset, breaking that down completely. And then allowing something that's more organic, that's more natural, and really finding our true natural selves to rise up. And it will be the younger people leading the way. You've seen that with Greta Thunberg and Malia. It's the younger people coming through, and we need to give them that space and support them in their visions, because they are the ones who will be leading us onward.
Yeah, yeah. Beautifully said. Thank you. So we're coming closer to the end of our time. I know you want to do a meditation, so can you lead us into a meditation?
Well, just be a very short one. So as I said, I like doing like a fourfold breath. So for people who are watching this, if you're able to just close your eyes, and what we're going to do, we're just going to sort of move from our head to our heart. And we do that from breathing in for a count of 4, holding for a count of 4 or a count of 2, exhaling for a count of 4, and then holding for a count of 4 or a count of 2. So the pace that I do it is that I inhale 2, 3, 4, hold 2, 3, 4, exhale 2, 3, 4, hold 2, 3, 4. And with that pace, we're just breathing a little deeper into our diaphragm. And then as we breathe a little deeper and exhale completely, begin to feel your shoulders move down away from your ears, body relaxing, allowing yourself just a bit of space to be. And as you inhale and exhale, just bring your awareness to that pause between the breath. That silent pause where there is nothing. And in the nothing, there is a connection to the darkness where all potential, all potentiality, all possibility resilience. And we're just going to sit in that space between the breath and just see what begins to unfold, what rises up. A thought, feeling, an image. And if something rises up, then on the next exhalation, just see it disappear. Something else might rise up again. And then on the exhalation, just release. Because the simple process of merely acknowledging and releasing can help pull back those layers that's been covering up that hidden gem, that bright light that flickers deep within you, the soul essence, soul purpose, a gift that you have been carrying with you, that you have buried because it didn't fit into someone else's expectation. And now it's the time for you to reclaim it by going into that darkness, that space between the breaths, and allow it to shine once more. Each inhalation, feel that flickering light energy coming back to life. And on the exhalation, release any thought or doubt, fear. On the inhalation, focus on that flickering light as it's beginning to grow brighter. And as you exhale, release the judgment, condemnation you may have received. Inhale and allow that light to grow any brighter. So it's almost consuming your whole being. And as you exhale, release the lingering doubts, the need for external validation. Because as you inhale, consuming that light of your own soul essence will give you the strength, the encouragement, even the tenacity to forge your own right path. And then bring your awareness back to the inhalation and exhalation of yourself. Taking another few deep breaths. And then coming back to the here and now, and with such a very simple process. You may wish to find a specific candle that you can light in actuality, or find a picture that you can maybe print out and keep in your purse or your wallet. But when you need to tap into the inner gift of your soul, you have that image with you. And if you haven't already done so, bring your awareness back to your fingers and toes, taking a deep breath. And then open your eyes. And this is something very, very simple that anytime you feel a little out of sorts, that someone was trying to dampen down your own light, just remember that you have this flame within you, your own passion, your own energy, your own soul spark, your own gift of the shadow within you.
Thank you, Francis. That was beautiful. Really, yeah. Helped me ground, Yeah, beautiful. Very calming.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you have anything to share, everyone, just put it in the chat. I'm sure Francis will be delighted to read your shares, your comments.
Yes, it's very simple. We seem to overlook the simplicity of things in our modern world.
Yeah.
And sometimes it is just a simple candle, or a picture of a candle, or a light. And if that doesn't resonate, you something that gives you that connection to carry with you.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah, thank you. So there's just one general question I'd like to ask you. Like, if you were the leader of the futuristic schools, the wisdom schools of the new earth, what would be priority for you, for the school? What would it look like for you?
Oh, goodness. I would do away, I'd like to say do away with buildings, but that might not always be right. But bring things back into circles instead of everything being linear. I think a lot of it, we've got to retrain our mindset, bring back more sort of not adapting Indigenous people's ways of doing things, because I don't like cultural appropriation, but we can learn. We can get back into nature. We can really look and get back into nature and learn from nature more. I think listen to everyone, and yes, everybody, just honor, bring back those really simple values of respect and circles. I think connecting us back into nature is going to help us forward.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much. And yeah, we've got lovely comments in the chat for you, Francis. Cindy says she loved the breath work into the heart space. So thank you for that. Yeah. Julie says, thank you for your sensitivity, including towards colonialism and nature. And Indesh says, thanks, Francis. I'm into shadow work too. Is there a way to reach out to you?
Yes, certainly through the Mystical Soul Academy. I understand that Emmy's already put those details into the chat. So it's mysticalsoulacademy.com. I have a newsletter there. You can sign up. You can find me on social media. I've also just started a Substack page. I have too much going on at the moment, but yes, if you're on social media, you just Google me, you will find me, because I tend to be a little bit out there, and I have fingers and a lot of toes, because or a lot of pies, because I have a lot of interests, but I see them all sort of intertwining as
Okay.
well.
Oh, beautiful. So, and you have a beautiful gift for the audience. Can you just share that, please?
Yes, certainly. It is continuing on with the sort of shadow work theme. I do work with mythology, in particular the dark goddesses, which can be a little bit confronting for some people. And the gift is a video presentation entitled Exploring the Concept of the Dark Goddess. So it is something about 40 minutes long. It's a video presentation where we sort of explore who the dark goddess is, what makes a goddess or a divine being dark, why she has this sort of paradoxical sort of image or concept. We sort of pigeonhole dark goddesses as being sort of one category, one aspect associated with death or symmetries. I've come up with probably about 9 categories so far. So we sort of explore those, which they are found in mythologies. And also how the goddess herself, the divine feminine, has sort of evolved over time throughout history and mythology. And when I'm talking about the dark goddess, people get sort of cooked up in gender. Anybody can approach the dark goddess, the divine feminine, like anybody can approach the divine masculine. I do find they've got different energies, like the dark goddesses and as opposed to the darker gods. But the goddesses themselves, because they've got this much sort of mothery aspect to them, believe it or not, anybody can approach them. And I think in this world where we are lacking the divine feminine or connection with the divine feminine, I think it's very important too for men or people who identify as men, or even everybody really, to explore the divine feminine a little bit more. So that's the offering, is the video on exploring the dark goddess, whether you see her in mythology or as an archetype, or just like myths. So yes.
Yeah, beautiful. So everyone, please check out Frances' free gift. The link will also be available below this session's recording. I will upload the recording within 24 hours, so please be patient. You will get it on the event schedule page. All the recordings, I've started uploading some, so just give me some time, and thanks for your patience. And Frances, any parting messages for our audience?
Breathe. The world's crazy. I think we've got this idea, or this rush. Everybody's in a rush. It's like we don't like what's happening in our world, so we want to focus on something new. To me, that's spiritual bypassing. We need to sort of close off this chapter, take ownership. Especially us white people, we need to take ownership, and then have a look as to what do we want to create, and how are we going to create it differently. Because if we don't close off the old stuff, we're just going to be repeating and be in the same predicament down the track. So we want to create something new, close off this chapter now, and then move forward, leave the baggage behind, but breathe, clear us, ground.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I think this year itself, 2025, has been of releasing and closure, right? Because in numerology, the number 9, because 2025 is equals 9, and nine is all about closure and just closing the chapters, that no longer serve us, right?
Yeah, and we've seen that all year. So even I know people like to manifest with new moons, but every new moon this year has been more about surrender and release. And it's been really interesting. Yeah. So there's get rid of that old stuff. We don't need it anymore. Declutter, spring clean, autumn clean, winter clean. I don't care. Just get rid of it all. We don't need it where we're going.
Yeah, true. That's true. Thank you. This was such an amazing, beautiful session, Frances. Good to connect with you. And everyone, thank you for joining us. And so if you're interested in beautiful presentations, transmissions, you can actually upgrade to lifetime access. And I'll just put the link in if you're interested in upgrading. At the moment, we're giving away all these 21 transmissions for 66 euros, but in about an hour, the price will go up to 111. So if you're interested, hurry now and get all these amazing transmissions for 66 euros. And this is the link for it. Okay, again, thank you, Francis. Thank you, everyone. And I'll see you again in an hour, everybody, if you want to join us for the next beautiful transmission. So see you then. Bye.
Thank you.
Have
Bye.
a beautiful day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.